or is there? And then I think some city.
Is Daughtry here? Okay. Diaz is not here. Lynch is here, Rose is here, Jack. Stephanie. Okay, good evening, everybody. It's great to see everybody on this beautiful summer evening. And really want to thank you all and welcome you to our third public hearing and our fourth meeting of the 2024 Charter Review Commission, and the first of our two public hearings that we will be held in Manhattan. And we've gotten a couple of questions about locations, and it's my hope that our next one will happen a little bit further north of where we are today in Manhattan. So we'll work together on that. It's also the first of 3 issue forums that the commission will host that will take a deep dive into important topics affecting our city. Today, we are focusing on fiscal responsibility and budgetary matters. We will hear from a number of experts, including our comptroller and friend, the Honorable Brad Lander. Next week, we will host forums on government and election reform in the Bronx on Monday, June 17th, and public safety in my home borough of Brooklyn on Thursday, June 20th. I should introduce myself for those of you that don't know me. I'm Carlos Shasura, Chair of the Charter Review Commission, and I'm honored to be here with such an esteemed and exciting group of individuals. I'm going to acknowledge them now. Our Vice Chair, the one and only Dr. Hazel Dukes, Kyle Bragg, yes, you can applaud them, Christopher Lynch, Max Rose, Jackie Rowe Adams, Stephanie McGraw, and joining virtually Ken Nye. So I thank you all for being here. I generally would have them all say a few words, but we want to jump right into the meeting. We have a lot to cover tonight. Let me thank, of course, President and Dean Anthony Crowell of New York Law School for hosting us and his entire team. Anthony and team, I thank you all so much. And we are also joined today by the staff of the Charter Review Commission, Executive Director, General Counsel, and the entire team. So I thank you all for making time. So, I want to just touch on a couple of things. So I mentioned tonight is an issue forum, and we're going to be talking about fiscal responsibility. But I want to be clear that everyone has an opportunity to testify. So it doesn't matter what the form is. You can talk about something other than fiscal responsibility tonight at our hearing on, or a public forum on public safety. You can talk about whatever you want. It's really an opportunity to hear from New Yorkers. And I think that's really exciting. So the Charter Review Commission is tasked with reviewing the entire city charter and recommending changes that will help city government work more efficiently and better serve all New Yorkers. In addition to reviewing the charter, we will be soliciting recommendations and comments on how to improve city government from members of the public and experts at forums like this evening. At the end of the process, the commission will determine what proposals to take to the voters in the form of ballot questions or question, depends, that will appear on the ballot at the November 5th general election. And as always, we welcome members of the public to comment both in person and via Zoom, and we will be hearing comments, again, in person, virtually. You can submit testimony. We've got you covered on all bases. So this hearing is the third in a series of meetings to hear ideas from the public to improve the city charter. We will be hosting additional input sessions around the city in the coming weeks, as I mentioned, including another one in Manhattan. We encourage you to tell your friends, neighbors, tweet about it, let people know that we are doing this. We all have jobs and schedules, but we are here because we are committed to helping improve New York in our little way. And if we can do that, then I think we've done some great things. We will do our best to accommodate everyone who wishes to speak, but if we run out of time before you have a turn, we ask you to come to another meeting or submit your testimony in writing. You could check out all of our dates on our website, www.nyc.gov/charter, and comments and testimony may be submitted in writing to charterinfo@citycharter.nyc.gov between now and the close of business July 12th. So to begin tonight's hearing and forum, let me welcome a true leader in our city, Miss Kathy Wild, a treasured colleague. She is the president and CEO of the Partnership for New York City, and she will be followed by an outstanding elected official, Assembly Member Deborah Glick. So, Miss Wild, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chairman Cicera and members of the Charter Revision Commission. Nice to see you all for the opportunity to testify today. The Partnership for New York City is deeply concerned about the affordability crisis facing New Yorkers, and we believe it is directly linked to the fiscal responsibility issues that the Commission is considering today. Later, you will hear from some real experts on the budget, which I am not. But in the meantime, I think that the partnership can provide a good understanding of how legislative and spending practices contribute to the high cost of living and doing business in our city. Today, New York is the highest cost city in America and the third most expensive city in the world after only Singapore and Zurich. We have an affordability crisis that impacts working people at virtually all income levels. And when local government increases its spending or imposes new mandates on employers, those costs are ultimately borne by taxpayers and consumers. Employers have responded to the affordability crisis by paying salaries in New York City that are about 20% higher than for the same job in lower cost jurisdictions. But this is still often not enough to make up for or to support a comfortable life in the 5 boroughs. Our costs are that high. Government has responded to the affordability crisis by creating new or expanded programs and services to subsidize households that cannot keep up with rising costs. As a result, city spending has increased by 50% in the last decade, and tax revenues have been increased to meet budget needs. Just one example is the case of rising rents, where over 30% of rent in a regulated apartment building is attributable to local real estate taxes. There is no more important challenge facing municipal government today than making our city more affordable to the average New Yorker while maintaining the programs and services that are essential for a livable and equitable city. What can the Charter Commission recommend to address this challenge? The answer must be providing more information on the fiscal and economic impact of legislation to help the council and administration make the best informed choices. We believe this commission should recommend language in the city charter that ensures there is meaningful independent analysis and public discussion of the fiscal and economic impacts of legislation prior to adoption, and that any legislation with a budget impact should be subject to the disciplined annual budget process. The charter already requires a fiscal impact statement called an FIS before the city council acts on legislation, but too often this involves only a cursory review that is not subject to serious consideration or public comment. We suggest that the charter stipulate a clear process on fiscal matters of a certain size that would involve 3 parties: the Council Finance Division, the Independent Budget Office, and the Office of Management and Budget. The FIS should be published online prior to the bill's first hearing and should be updated no later than the time the bill is in final form and laid on the desks of council members. The charter does not currently require consideration of the financial impact of new laws on the city's citizens or its economy. The FIS focuses solely on the city revenues and expenses. The commission should add a requirement for economic impact statements to the existing FIS. This statement should include analysis such as the impact of a bill on the creation or elimination of jobs and businesses, potential changes in costs or prices for consumers and industries, and changes to the city's ability to attract investment. We think all of these actions will contribute to helping us understand the reasons for our high costs and achieving a more affordable city. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. I have a question and then I'll turn it over to my colleagues. You mentioned Council Finance, IBO, and OMB. I just want to make sure I understand your position clearly. Is it your position and the partnership's position that those three entities should create this analysis prior, or is it a different entity that creates the analysis?
No, we think, and it's not as explicit in, the IBO is created within a city charter amendment and really hasn't been involved in performing that function. But we think that there should be a serious look by all three agencies because OMB has unique insights into the situation. Independent Budget Office, the important there is the word independent.
Right.
Is somebody's looking at the consideration, looking at the fiscal impacts. And this, obviously, this is particularly important for larger expenditure items, but for new programs, we've seen in recent years that we've had situations where legislation was passed that could cost hundreds of millions of dollars that's outside the budget. So there's no appropriation for it. How does it get implemented? And we've also seen other situations where legislation is passed that has a huge impact on the costs of small business without any consideration of what's that going to cost us in terms of jobs, in terms of neighborhood stability. So we think both those things deserve a much more careful look, and that particularly for big items, for new programs, for permanent programs that we're going to have over the long term, you know, we're having this fight over 3K now because we didn't do this kind of analysis before passing the program. And we feel that for big items, the three entities all should be looking at these issues.
Great. Is there a numerical amount that you think should be a threshold before this happens?
Well, the budget expert who I consulted on that, Carol O'Claracan, who was budget director under Mayor Dinkins and is a longtime friend, suggested to, and former chief economist at DC 37, suggested to me $100 million in terms of the complete review on the city spending.
Great. Do any of the commissioners have any questions or comments for Ms. Wild?
I just want to say, through the years, you with your partnership and just being a citizen has always been thoughtful of how we can make this city better for all of us to live. So thank you so much, Kathy, for your input. I listen very carefully. I always think communication is so great. And so bringing the three entities, financial, together do make a lot of sense, common sense.
Thank you, Commissioner Dukes. Much appreciated.
Thank you. Anybody else? All right, Kathy Wild, thank you very much. Our next speaker will be Assemblymember Deborah Glick of Manhattan. Assemblymember, I don't think I need to introduce you. Everybody knows who you are, and thank you for your service in New York.
Well, thank you. I'm here because yesterday afternoon I got an email at my private email about this event. And we searched our official email and found that sometime after hours on Tuesday, something had actually been sent. I'm not sure that most of the citizenry is particularly well-informed about the process. And so the notion that making information in government more transparent, it would have, I think, been maybe helpful for more people. Manhattan, the last major revision was a very robust, long process in which commission staff went to community boards across the city, got testimony on a wide range of issues. This seems to be a very abbreviated process, which is concerning to me. I appreciate you good souls were picked by the mayor in his infinite wisdom. So I think that you are troopers for being here. But I do think that that it is concerning that this appeared to be hurried and rushed. And to be here today in June for the possible a question to be on the general election ballot seems to me not sufficient time for there to be the kind of outreach to the public, the input from the public, and the ability for the staff to go through comments and to provide a really robust review of the charter, which all of you have committed to doing, and I thank you very much for that. But I am distressed that the majority of our responses to our immediate e-blast yesterday was, gee, I had no idea. And so I don't know how many of my constituents could show up on short notice to be here today when it's so convenient to them, but so not convenient to so many other New Yorkers. So I appreciate your comment at the beginning that you hope that there will be more opportunity for people in other parts of the city, because I do feel that sometimes people feel overlooked, left out, and the charter, this notion of fiscal responsibility, I appreciate the comments from the partnership. The affordability crisis is, and the administration is taking many, many steps that unfortunately I don't think will result in more affordable housing, but rather more luxury housing, and that is of deep concern to me. I don't know what we could do in the charter that could do more to make the city more affordable for everyday people. The biggest thing is, in fact, housing, and I'm not sure what this commission can do in terms of the Constitution of the City of New York that impacts that, except that many of the people on the panel individually have done a lot of work trying to make this a more affordable city for them, but for the constituency. But I am disappointed in what appears to be, to all observers, an attempt by this mayor to just sort of derail something the council was planning and putting this commission in place when it's serious business, and at the very least should not be wasting the time and energy of so many wonderful people for such an abbreviated process. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any comments or questions? None? Okay. Our first panel will be James Bristow from the New York City Office of Management and Budget and Assistant Commissioner Matt Penfold from the New York City Department of Finance.
Thank you, members of the Charter Revision Commission. My name is James Bristow. I am the Senior Assistant Director for Intergovernmental Relations for the Mayor's Office of Management and Budget, known as OMB. OMB is the City of New York's chief financial agency. We have a wide range of responsibilities that are critical towards protecting the city's fiscal integrity, which include developing the city's expense and capital budgets, including balancing the city budget as required by law, overseeing the budgets of nearly 90 city agencies and related entities, enhancing operations management citywide, and evaluating the efficiency and cost effectiveness of city services and proposals, and the fiscal impact of local, state, and federal legislation. Providing vital information to government officials on the local, national, and world economies, as well as forecasting economic conditions and estimating city revenues. Put simply, our staff ensures that city operations are implemented efficiently, effectively, and that the city's resources are managed responsibly. In light of our role in these responsibilities, we evaluate potential charter commission proposals through the lens of the potential impact on the city's fiscal stability. It is our responsibility to make sure that any change to the laws and principles that guide our actions are based on sound fiscal management and build upon the current tools and flexibility necessary to manage the city's fiscal needs and ensure that the city remains a safe and clean place to live, work, and raise a family. Over the past 4 years, the city has navigated 2 substantial back-to-back fiscal challenges. While we use different sets of tools to manage through these crises, there's a common denominator: our adherence to strong fiscal management. This view is supported by ratings agencies, which have consistently upheld our strong bond ratings and creditworthiness, citing our strong governance and fiscal best practices, which has also made the city's finances the envy of nearly every municipality in the world. Finally, we view the Charter Revision Commission as an opportunity. As an institution, OMB values a cautious approach to fiscal planning. However, we also value transparency and innovation and do not have a monopoly on wisdom or ideas. With this in mind, we look forward to reviewing the suggestions that are made to this commission and the recommendations that you will issue. Thank you for the opportunity to speak before you today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Matt Penfold, and I'm the Assistant Commissioner for Property Tax Research and Analytics in the Division of Tax Policy and Data Analytics at the Department of Finance. I'm pleased to testify in front of the Commission today to speak about the work the department does on behalf of the city. The Department of Finance is responsible for administering the tax laws and for collecting various types of tax revenue on behalf of the city. The most notable being property tax, but also taxes including business corporation tax, real property transfer tax, utility tax, and commercial rent tax. Thank you. The Department of Finance collects over $45 billion annually, revenue that makes every city service possible. Public education, police and fire protection, hospitals and healthcare facilities, parks and recreation centers. It all starts with the Department of Finance. If you own a home, drive a car, rent an apartment, or start a business, you will interact with the Department of Finance at some point. All of these taxes come with a great deal of complexity for the taxpayers they apply to. The Department of Finance has around 2,000 employees that administer the tax and revenue laws of the city fairly, efficiently, and transparently to instill public confidence, encourage compliance, while providing exceptional customer service. The Department of Finance endeavors to ensure fiscal responsibility. Public budgeting can be described as getting and spending. Our role is the getting. We work closely with the Office of Management and Budget, who are responsible for setting and managing the budget. We assist by providing collections data, comparisons to previous years, and if there are any, highlight new tax policy proposals that might impact collections of any of the city's tax revenue sources. We communicate with the Office of Management and Budget regularly on collection numbers, ensuring they are equipped with the most up-to-date information so budget decisions can be made with as much clarity as possible. Collections will fluctuate throughout the year. It can be best summarized as there will be peaks and valleys. The city typically sees an influx of collections, for example, at the beginning of July, which is the start of the new tax year, but there will be periods throughout the year where certain collection streams taper off. Understanding the amount of money that the city will collect and is therefore able to spend is a crucial part of government. Fiscal responsibility includes careful consideration when proposing changes to a tax system or the collections process. The Department of Finance is not the only part of this equation. We have partners in government that play a major role in this process. For example, the City Council votes on the tax rate for each of the city's 4 property tax classes each year. The council has similar authority over the interest rates that are applied to late property tax payments. Each of these authorities have parameters that confine the council's latitude. But at the end of the day, they do govern this authority, which can have major impacts on the city's revenue. More specifically, the interest rates that the city sets on late property tax payments are based off recommendations made by the New York City's Banking Commission. The Banking Commission makes these recommendations based on a variety of factors, one of the most important being interest rates of other financial institutions are imposing. Comparing interest rates is important when thinking about the number of New Yorkers who would be impacted and how this would impact future collections. For example, if your credit card company has an interest rate of 20%, your home repair loan an interest rate of 15%, and your unpaid property tax debt an interest rate of 2%, most New Yorkers are going to prioritize the other payments over their property taxes. This will impact the city's revenue and therefore the overall budget. In conclusion, it is our fundamental belief that the city needs to make decisions holistically, considering all the possible impacts, not just on the city's budget, but on New Yorkers at large. We are grateful for our partners in city government that willingly take on this responsibility. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to testify before you today.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments from the commissioners? Kyle?
Thank you for your testimony. Heard some synergies between what I've heard from the partnership, Kathy Weil, concerns regarding possibility of what legislation from the city council, the impact it might have both on the fiscal health of the city, but also its citizens. Am I right in assuming that some of the recommendations that she made is where you were leaning into?
To speak from our side, we certainly are concerned about legislation that that requires a fiscal impact or some sort of funding that occurs outside the budget process. The budget is passed as a way to predict the expenditures for the upcoming fiscal year, at least the upcoming financial plan. So when legislation is then that has a fiscal impact is legislated outside of that process, it can have a negative impact on the way that we're implementing the budget. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Did I hear you say that you do forecast for preparing your budget?
Absolutely. There's, the budget itself, lasts.
Right.
It does, it goes throughout.
But
the
when you
fiscal
say you
year.
do forecasts, do you get any input from the citizens of New York? Do you have hearings? What do
Absolutely.
you forecast on from data?
So, when I was referring to forecast just a moment ago, I was saying that the budget is set in place for a year, and that is, the predicted expenditures for a certain program area or for an agency for the course of that year. As far as public input, however, there is, after the January budget that's put out, as well as the April budget that's put out, there's a series of hearings at which OMB appears, as well as all of the largest agencies as well. And there's also a chance for public comment in addition to
Just
that.
listening to our assemblywoman, when you says that, what part of the constituency, the city people, is it community boards? Is it?
So there's also a built-in process for community boards to opine on the budget throughout the course of the fiscal year. And then it can be individual citizens, it can be trade associations, it can be advocacy groups that deliver public testimony, as well as input that's solicited through elected officials who relate it to the administration. That pathway is frequently used as well.
Great, thank you very much. Our next panel will be the New York City Independent Budget Office. Louisa Chaffee, the director, will provide testimony. We're ready when you are.
Okay. Is the acoustics okay?
Yes.
Okay. Good evening, Chairman, Cesura, Vice Chair Dr. Dukes, Executive Director Savino, and members of the commission. I'm Louisa Chafee, the Director of the New York City Independent Budget Office. IBO is a nonpartisan, independent government agency mandated by the New York City Charter. IBO's mission is to enhance public understanding of the New York City's budget, public policy, and economy through independent analysis. For the fiscal year that starts July 1st, 2024, the mayor's proposed budget totals $111.6 billion. The city's budget is the fourth largest in the country. The size alone warrants transparency. You have IBO's written testimony, but I'd like to focus on just a few points this evening. The first, enhancing the city's budget structure to promote transparency. Each year, when the City Council adopts the budget, it authorizes spending in a series of categories referred to as units of appropriation, or UAs. The idea was for the budget to be assembled with clear, understandable building blocks to show New Yorkers how the city allocates its resources and to facilitate effective oversight. Large mid-year shifts in spending between one UA and another would require City Council approval. In practice, though, neither the original goal of transparency nor the City Council review of major spending has really been realized. Some agency budgets include UA categories that are understandable and allow the public to see how programs are funded. The UAs of the Department of Social Services include legal service programs, emergency food assistance, and fair fares, so they're grouped by function. But the UAs for many other city agencies are far more opaque. The budgets of all 123 police precincts are combined into a single UA, along with all of NYPD's borough-wide offices and various response units or divisions, such as detective work, forensic investigation, narcotics, and strategic response. It's a single UA budgeted at $1.5 billion out of a total agency budget of approximately $5.8 billion. New UAs are often added each year as a part of budget negotiations, but there has not been a systematic approach to the dual challenge of ensuring transparency and managerial flexibility. So IBO calls upon the Commission to examine the Charter's UA description in light of the goal of increased transparency so that the public can clearly identify how each key function of an agency is provided and funded. My second point regards enhancing accessibility of financial impact information. In the launch of this Charter Revision Commission, the mayor's press release stated that this commission is charged, quote, to evaluate processes for determining the financial impact of proposed legislation, whether the financial impact is funded, and making that information more transparent to the public, unquote. I'm pleased to be here to discuss IBO's work in support of these goals. The Charter currently requires the City Council to prepare fiscal impact statements on each proposed local law prior to a committee vote and directs the IBO to prepare analyses when requested by specific officials. IBO's ability to provide useful fiscal impact depends on 1, the clarity of the proposed legislative language, 2, the existence and timeliness of data from the relevant agencies, and 3, the timing of the request relative to the potential council vote. As a point of comparison, the Congressional Budget Office, the federal equivalent of IBO, is legally mandated to price virtually all congressional enactments each year. However, its staff is considerably larger than IBO's, and the congressional calendar affords significant time between committee vote and adoption. And further, while CBO prices the bills, most cost estimates indicate negligible budgetary impact. Here in New York City, in recent years, the City Council has enacted between 125 and 175 local laws each year. The Council's calendar between committee consideration and the full City Council vote is generally extremely short. Similar to the federal arena, most laws do not have significant budget impacts. and some are drafted in a manner that makes estimating costs very difficult. So IBO welcomes a dialogue with the Commission as to how IBO might add value in this area, particularly by analyzing proposals that have the potential to trigger large cost increases in amounts that would be material to the city's overall budget. The third point I'd like to talk about is ensuring cost-effective services to New Yorkers. So New Yorkers are not well served unless city agencies administer the budget both effectively and efficiently, ensuring that the city gets real value for its spending. Emergency contracting is ripe for reform. IBO's analysis of areas such as asylum seeker services and the city's COVID-19 response raised concerns that the city has incurred costs due to government agencies' continued reliance on contracts that were first awarded at the height of the crisis, emergency contracts. It makes sense that agencies must award emergency contracts with little, if no, competition in the crisis. But they are often extended long past when it is both feasible and prudent to seek other vendors at lower costs. So IBO supports this commission's examination to establish a 2-year time limitation on these contracts and only allowing ongoing use when both the controller and the mayor renew their joint determination that the emergency procurement method continues to be appropriate. IBO welcomes the opportunity to work with you and your staff around these and other ideas in the testimony and enhancing financial responsibility and increasing transparency. I'm available to you if you have any questions this evening or in the weeks to come, and I thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Great, thank you. I want to just make sure I understand something. So is it your testimony that you would like to see, or IBO would like to see, for emergency contracts, 2 years max?
IBO would recommend that emergency contracts last 2 years unless at the 2-year mark, the two entities that must agree before an emergency contract begins, the mayor and the controller, again agree at 2 years that the emergency is still warranted.
Got it. So it's 2-year max, subject to an agreement of those two elected officials.
Exactly.
Great.
And it's those two officials that start the emergency contract.
Great, thank you. Anybody else? Ms. McGraw?
Yes, hi. I'd like to, can you explain when you say emergency contracts, what would be considered as an emergency contract? If you're saying that you want them to go a 2-year terms, what, can you elaborate a little more on emergency?
I'd be happy to, but I'll try and
Please.
not go into such depth that you fall asleep. So there are many
Thank you very
different
much for
ways.
that.
There are many different ways that the city buys services, procures services through competitive bidding, but also in very certain circumstances when an official emergency has been declared, the mayor and the controller can agree that it is an emergency and they will embark upon services without any competition. So for example, after Superstorm Sandy, during the beginning of COVID, and again with the asylum seeker arrival beginning, there were situations so sudden and so grave that the mayor and the controller, the two entities with the responsibility, agreed that this was not a place where traditional competition should occur, but rather they would embark upon the emergency contract vehicle, is what it's called in the world of procurement. So they'd use this sort of special type of contract. But it doesn't require competition, and the pricing is often very high compared to competition because the reality is that competition brings pricing down. And so wise spending of dollars is often linked to some form of vendors competing for business.
Thank you.
I would just like to say, that's a great point for the 2 years and putting that limitations on them, because many times you see the city contracts are given out. And these contracts go on years and years and years. And then a contract could go from $5 million, 10 years later, we're spending $60 million on a contract. So think that was a great point that you brought out. You're talking about fiscal responsibility and transparency, but we have these contracts that are just going on without any oversight, any interaction of these agencies that are just going on. So this evening is just hearing about the whole fiscal responsibility and how it's important for these agencies to work together. It will help New Yorkers saving money and also perhaps to help with the real estate issues that we talked about that are pricing people out of the city.
Thank
Great.
you.
Thank you. Okay, Ms. Chaffee, appreciate it, and we appreciate your written testimony. It'll give us some work
Thank
to
you.
do over the
Thank
weekend.
you very much.
Thank you very much.
Have a great evening.
I'm going to ask a speaker to come up. Richard, I didn't know your name was Richard, by the way. Richard, you didn't know. Richard Bodedel, please come up and present your testimony. And following this, we will have the Citizens Budget Commission and Empire Center. And we're going to ask you to stay within 3 minutes if you can.
Okay. First of all, I want to thank the commission and my friend over here, the co-chairman over here, Hazel Dukes. I know you many, many years. It's an honor to be here with you and Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
First of all, I want to let people know I'm here now as a father, a grandfather, and my family still lives in New York City. So this is one of the most important issues I really believe facing us right now. A lot of people don't know my background. I was a New York City homicide detective. I retired after 15 years. My career in law enforcement spans now almost 55 years of working in security and investigations. Right now, I have a company out of New York. I have over 500 employees, 98% minorities, and I continue to work trying to protect this city. In the New York City Police Department, I was involved with over 1,500 felony arrests. I had 80 citations. I was also one of the original decoys back in the early 70s when we were surged with robberies. I used to dress up, put theatrical makeup on, and we'll go around New York City and get mugged. I was stabbed, I was shot up, I was hospitalized dozens of times. I love this city, and that's why I'm here today. And please bear with me a little bit. I may ramble a little bit, but I think it's one of the most important issues. Right now, we have a major threat. That's the public safety and crime that's going on out there. My own family, my sons, my daughters, my grandchildren, I have a really invested interest here. The city council's decisions are impeding effective policing with excessive directives on bans, on restraints in the name of preventing excessive force. The ban, for instance, on a headlock, they call it a chokehold. And this was never disputed or never debated in the city council. They have a diaphragm law. I ask anyone, if you have someone resisting arrest and you're trying to handcuff them, I could take a 90-year-old female, and if she's fighting with me, it's going to be very, very difficult not to touch them. And that's one of the issues that the city council, the mayor puts something out, the city council puts a directive, and all of a sudden the mayor vetoes it, and the next thing, the city council overrides his veto. The mayor is a former police captain. He knows about policing, and the city council comes and they put all these directives. Every time the mayor tries to do something, it doesn't happen. This is really an important issue because of morale. Now the NYPD is mandated to provide detailed reports. If someone goes up to a police officer on the street and asks them directions to Times Square, they got to stop and they got to print out a report onto their iPhone and they got to send it in. All these things are only increasing the reporting, taken away from the actual policing. This has contributed to the rising in crime and the slow of the response time for serious crimes. This police officers' safety is at risk and prevent effective policing in the high-risk situations. Our officers' hands are tied due to these new policies, making few arrests. Crime statistics are falsely reported as downward. The numbers are not accurate because less cooperation from the public, as the police are portrayed as their enemy. Additionally, less emphasis on protecting and policing has allowed criminals to become brazen to our police officers. We see it all the time. They spit at them, they do everything. In 2021, the city passed a significant police reform legislation that included measures to make it easier to sue police officers, the removal of qualified immunity. Now you have a police officer that comes on the force, all of a sudden he's trying to do his job. He gets sued, not just losing his job, he gets sued. The home that he's been paying into, they could take it away from him. Why are we losing the police officers? Why are they retiring and the best of breeds are going out? Without our police officers, then we're going to have anarchy in this city. New York's anti-mask law, that was put into effect because of COVID. That was in 2020. But right now we have facial recognition. And we all know, and we all could read the newspapers, we have people coming through our southern border coming into New York City. And in coming into New York City, somebody's on the terrorist watch list. When they wear a mask, you can't facially identify them as being terrorists. And it's going to happen in New York. I was here 9/11. I went down there. Even though I was retired, I went down there the first day. I stayed for day after day. I remember 9/11. And this is one of the issues. Immigration, migration. Look, I am really out there for the American dream. I see families. I see ladies sitting on the street with their babies on their back selling fruit. I feel for them. I'm really open for that. That's not what I'm worried about. I'm worried about the criminal element of gangs, i.e. those two officers in Queens that were shot by an illegal from Venezuela who had been arrested on other crimes. But we can't turn them over to ICE. You tell me why, when you're a person who gets arrested on a felony and you're illegally in this country, why can't we turn it over to ICE? It's time for that to change. And I know, I've talked to this mayor before. I know he tries to go, and every time he tries to go with something, the city council overrides his veto. My own son was
So
hit.
we're gonna ask you to wrap up if you can. It's
okay.
Way over 3 minutes.
I got right here. My own son was hit by an illegal scooter going to lunch from my office. He had a severe injury to his knee, ACL, he had to get operated on. Okay, we'll wrap it up. Officers are feeling unsupported by the city leadership. Officers' hands are tied. We need to strip the power of the progressive city council and give it back to this mayor who knows about law and order and can help the police officers in this city. Because without the police, we are going to be in real trouble. And I'll tell you today, and you can mark my words, we will have a terrorist attack soon. We don't have any idea. We have no identity on these people that have come to our southern border. And if we don't turn them over to ICE, there are a lot of people on that watch list that are going to cause destruction. I'm worried about my grandson that's sitting over here, my daughter, and my family. I'm not here as a cop. I'm here as a New York citizen to say, please, we have to be together and we have to fight this crime wave that is destroying our beautiful city of New York. Everybody says, Bo, you got a lot of money, move to Florida. I'm not moving to Florida. I'm staying. You've got to support this city to make this city safe for everyone.
Thank you
Please.
very much.
Thank you.
Yes.
Lots of rain in Florida right now, so we don't want to be there. Yes, ma'am.
What a presentation.
Thank you.
It is the truth. And that's why we're here not only for public safety, for the city, period, being safe. And people like you to speak up and speak out. How do you see our Charter Revision Commission working on this issue?
Okay, thank you. That's a very beautiful question. Thank
Great
you.
question.
Okay, what we can actually do is put it on the ballot in November to give the policing policy. I'm talking about law enforcement. Crime in New York City is the biggest issue in my heart. You know, I believe in the housing and all that, but I'm talking about the crime. Put it on the ballot in November. Let the people of New York vote if they want to support our cops and support our mayor to make our city safer. That's what I'd like to do, because I'll show you. People from all over our cities will vote to support our police, because that's what we want to do. Be safe. My grandson can't walk around. The other day he's attacked. My daughters, they get attacked. I am scared. I carry a gun. They can't. I'm scared for everyone in your families up here. This is real.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
you.
Yeah.
Yes, Mr. Rose.
Thanks for your testimony. Nice to see you.
Thank you.
I'm just confused about one thing, right? Just a couple of questions. One, do you see any point of the city council?
No, it's not the point of the city council. It's the point about that what do they know actually? When we had that headlock, the choke thing that came in from that incident that happened in Staten Island, all of a sudden I used I call it a headlock. I used it hundreds of times. We have to take each one of these directives and evaluate what it is. A chokehold is a chokehold. A headlock is
No,
a
no,
headlock.
I get that. I guess I'm asking
Yeah.
just like a more philosophical question here,
Yeah.
like in democracy, right?
Right.
And in any legislature, people legislate all the time about things that they don't have immediate experience in. Right? You see it in Congress. There's
Yeah.
people sitting on an armed services committee that never served in the military and so on and so forth. So I guess I'm trying to ask you here, do you think that any city council is unprepared to legislate on public safety issues? Or is your problem about this city council in New York City?
That's a very good question. You know, you have an executive branch. Our mayor's the executive branch. When you could put an emergency executive order that we will turn over any felony people that are in this country illegal to ICE. The mayor could do that. And the city council doesn't have to do it. That's why you have an executive branch, and then you have the lawmaking branch that you were part of. My point is, we could work with the city council, but when they override vetoes that this mayor knows they're wrong, what do you do to stop it? I say we have a democracy in New York and America, right? And in New York, why not put it on the ballot in November on public safety and policing and let the people of New York, I don't care if we win by one vote. Democracy is should be the ones that control.
No, I get it. Thank you for the clarification. And by the way, with that tan, you look like you spend at least some time in Florida. So.
Thank you
I'm
very
going to tell you something. I'd rather be here in New York fighting for New York City, for all the people. A lot of people don't know. When I was a decoy, I used to decoy up in Harlem. When they told me you can't go to Harlem, Bo, it's too dangerous. I said, well, I'm going up there to protect the people. And that's what I'm here today. You want to see some knife wounds on me? I got them. I was hospitalized.
We could do that post charter commission.
Yeah.
All right. All right.
Another
And
day.
thank you so much.
Thank you
everybody.
very much.
You guys can, the other lady before said you're not going to do anything. I think you can do something. Let's let the people of New York vote for public safety.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your passion. All right. Let me welcome Andrew Rain, the president of Citizens Budget Commission, and EJ McMahon from the Empire Center for Public Policy and the Manhattan Institute. And Dean Crowell, I thanked you earlier, but I will thank you now that you're actually here. I appreciate you allowing us to visit and spend some time at New York Law School. What do you say? We are New York's law school, is that right? Well, please give a round of applause to Dean Anthony Crowell. Oh, actually, I'm being told that Professor Mitchell Moss, you are going to join this panel as well. So it's great to see you. Please join us. But gentlemen, you can begin.
And thanks for the opportunity to speak right after Bo Dado. Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to participate, and thank you all for your service to the people of New York. I'm Andrew Ryan, President of the Citizens Budget Commission. We are at your service to help you through this process, not only with our recommendations, but by providing any feedback on issues that you want to raise to us. We're pleased to provide our following recommendations and options, which I'll briefly review. We've provided a more detailed memo. Given the CRC's accelerated timeframe, these are preliminary, and we're providing some of the details, and we'll get them to you, of course, in time so you can do your work both fast and with high quality. We have 7 preliminary recommendations focused on 3 areas. First are 5 to improve the city's fiscal integrity and stability. The number 1 is to create a rainy day fund deposit, withdrawal, and balance rules. The last rainy day fund created the last Charter Revision Commission created the rainy day fund. This is the Charter Revision Commission that can bring it home with those rules. Currently, deposits aren't mandated, making it unlikely the city is going to make sufficient deposits in good times and protect New Yorkers in the future. Furthermore, you can actually use the fund for almost anything. At minimum, the charter should require mandatory deposits, withdrawals be limited to a recession or severe emergency, and a target size. We're currently developing more specific language to include the economic conditions under which to require those deposits, guidance on those mandatory deposit side, and how to define a recession or a severe emergency. Second, we have a retiree health benefits trust. We think it should be created in the charter and established rules. Right now, it's established in law and it's frankly used as a de facto rainy day fund. The charter should establish the RHBT to ensure it's available to accumulate the resources so that we can pay the city's long-term liability for retiree benefits. And the charter should also require annual deposits and start to fill up that fund so that we have that money available for those retirees, and also can eliminate the ability to use it as rainy day fund because now we got a good one. The next two can be seen as a pair to improve the accuracy and relevance of the legislative and executive fiscal estimates, and these have long been an issue, but they've come to a head in the last year. The next recommendation is to strengthen the requirements for legislative fiscal impact statements. I've heard these discussed today. Legislation has often been introduced and sometimes passed that has massive and potentially destabilizing fiscal impacts. Charter required added sunshine can increase the likelihood that fiscal needs are considered when passing this legislation. The charter should first require that impact statements be published much earlier so the council and the public can have time to consider them. And then to increase the likelihood that long-run affordability is actually better promoted and considered by the council, CBC is developing two possible approaches. One is to require the fiscal impact statement to identify a preferred way to pay for it, whether to be offsetting savings or locally controlled revenues. That's not to lock it in and require it, but to put it on record saying, how are we going to pay for this big piece of legislation? And the other is whether and how to limit the city's obligation to implement newly acted policy that has major budget implications if it has not been incorporated into the budget. Of course, such a requirement only should be designed so that it does not remove the appropriate authority of the legislative branch. This is a delicate balance. On the executive side, our recommendation is to improve the accuracy of financial plan estimates. The charter has a requirement that revenues and expenditure estimates be reasonable and appropriate, and that's good, but it should be bolstered. Under budgeting has increased to unprecedented levels, distorting the budget picture and the fiscal debate. CBC is refining three improvement approaches, the first being to require the city to provide details of its estimates if the city and state controllers identify that those estimates are varying significantly from their own estimates. Second is to require the executive to explain if there are significant year-to-year changes, such as when dollars fall off a fiscal cliff, but the program is assumed to continue. That deserves an explanation. And the third is to consider whether there should be controller certification. The fifth fiscal recommendation is to cap debt service at 15% of tax revenue so that debt is not only affordable for the economy, but for the operating budget and doesn't squeeze out other priorities. Two quick ones to go.
Please.
The second improvement area is management, quality, and efficiency. We need quality management or we ain't delivering good services to the people. Performance management requires both robust data and a management review and accountability process. The charter establishes the mayor's management report, but to complement that, the charter should set forth a framework, the management, planning, scope, periodicity, how often, and reporting of a comprehensive performance management process. And our final area of improvement is to improve resident feedback. The charter should require the city to conduct and publish a statistically valid resident feedback survey at least once every 5 years with results at the community board level so we know what every neighborhood's thinking, and by different demographic groups, race, ethnicity, income level, so we can find out straight from New Yorkers what is the quality of city services and what is the quality of life. That feedback straight from New Yorkers is what city government needs to deliver to New Yorkers. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions, and thank you again for the opportunity to be here, and thank you again for your service.
Andrew, appreciate you as always.
That I can speak this fast, but it's great to be in New York.
Good. I'm going to let the other two panelists go, and then we'll do questions if we have any. Sir, you're up.
Oh, EJ, go.
Thank you very much. Thank you for this opportunity to speak to you tonight on this important subject. From a historical standpoint, this is very well timed because remind you as we gather here this evening, we're approaching the 50th anniversary of the fiscal crisis, which the city's virtual bankruptcy, which is the event that shaped much of the budget process that we're talking about, had a profound influence on the charter provisions as they now stand. The budget process that developed in the wake of that crisis, as shaped by city charter and state law, I think has paid numerous dividends and strengthened and improved the budget process a lot. But that doesn't mean updates are not clearly in order after all these years. You've already heard a lot of good ideas on several subjects here this evening or this afternoon. I agree with much of what Andrew just proposed, particularly for greater accountability and better financial impact statements. Also, what was suggested by the IBO director, and especially, for instance, the 2-year contract limit, and again, strength and role for IBO in doing and more regularly doing estimates of major proposals. I'm going to touch on 3 areas, 2 of which you've heard these other speakers touch on, one of which is the first to raise, I think. The first stems from what's the largest wild card in the city's current financial plan, which is the city council's expansion of the Family Homelessness and Eviction Prevention Supplement Program, also known as FHEPS or FEPS. I've heard both. I'll go with FHEPS at the risk of annoying people. The 5-year cost estimates for the entitlement expansion enacted by the council range from a low of just under $11 billion, which is the council's estimate, to over $17 billion, which is the mayor's estimate. Even if the lower figure is accurate, this may rank as the most expensive initiative ever launched by the council or any council outside the budget process. As a social services commissioner said in her December letter to the deputy council speaker, the local laws creating or expanding the program, quote, raise substantial financial, operational, and legal issues, unquote. However, putting those issues aside from all the substance associated with this policy change, the way the FHEPS expansion came about via 4 local laws enacted outside the budget process, kind of beside it, but outside it, clearly violated the spirit, if not the letter, of the city charter. As you know, the city now faces a class action lawsuit on this matter aimed at forcing the mayor to implement the program. The plaintiff's legal brief in that case asserts, among other things, that, quote, no New York City charter provision supports the notion that a local law must be specifically funded by an appropriation for its implementation to be valid. Now, it could be argued in response to that the charter implicitly requires an appropriation for such expenditures. But in any case, lawsuit aside, the requirement needs to be clarified once and for all. So I began with, in this first area, 3 specific recommendations. The wording of the provision changes I give here, but the most important is no local law requiring additional city funds expenditures shall take place unless supported by a separate and distinct item of appropriation. That's basic. Repeating a figure that was mentioned in the IBO testimony earlier, when it comes to big, very significant program expansions, no separate and distinct appropriation with a certified fiscal impact of $100 million or more in additional city funds, when fully effected, should begin to take effect in any year unless contingent upon and linked to reductions totaling the same or more in other city funds expenditures. Provided, however, this requirement could be waived by a mayor. By the way, why $100 million, as was mentioned in Kathy Wiles' testimony? $100 million is the figure in the state emergency financial law that represents the maximum deficit the city can run before triggering a control period, or at least used to. My next recommendation is aimed at dealing with an issue that Andrew raised via the CBC, which is, as he said, under budgeting in the mayor's financial plan has reached unprecedented levels. This has been a long-time feature and syndrome of a city budget. It didn't begin with this mayor. It goes back at least to the early Giuliani days, but it has been quite extreme in recent years. For instance, in the fiscal 25 plan, examples include overtime costs, which the city controller estimates will total $1 billion more than the mayor estimates in the remainder of this year and all of next. And welfare cash assistance, with the comptroller says the mayor is lowballing to the tune of $500 million next year. The state controller's report, I think, roughly agreed with that. And both of the controller estimates are far more credible than the estimate in the mayor's financial plan. To deal with that issue, I suggest, I have a similar suggestion to CBC's, but starting earlier in the process, as follows. Any budget line for which the mayor's financial plan forecasts a year-to-year expenditure decrease shall be accompanied by a detailed supporting statement explaining why and how such a decrease is expected to materialize. That doesn't happen now. It's just sort of blithely stated. It needs to be backed up with details so that it can be considered and its credibility can be weighed. One last area I'm going to talk about deals with the subject that was the basic underlying original sin behind the fiscal crisis, which is the use of long-term and borrowed money to cover operating expenses in the expense budget. You've got a charter provision now, Section 217C, that was designed to cover that by saying the city may issue capital debt only to finance capital projects, and the capital budget may not include expense items that are properly includable only in the expense budget. That's designed to prevent what the city was doing for 15 years or 14 years before it collapsed. Nonetheless, in fiscal years 2002 and 2003, the city's budget was balanced in part by $2.1 billion in fiscal recovery notes issued by the Transitional Finance Authority in the wake of 9/11. Approval for that borrowing authority came from the legislature days after the 9/11, the World Trade Center attack. But it quickly became apparent, while the human cost of the World Trade Center attack was incalculable, the actual fiscal impact in terms of reconstruction and recovery costs on the city was minimized by a very generous outpouring of federal aid. Those two bond issues total of $2.1 billion, beginning under Mayor Giuliani and again in the first year of Mayor Bloomberg, essentially served to paper over a budget gap that was clearly present in Mayor Giuliani's last budget before the attack. There was basically a garden, putting aside the very serious attack. The fiscal situation really amounted to aside from that, which was covered by the federal government, it was a garden variety fiscal crisis shortfall driven by a recession and by expenditures running in excess of likely revenues. We ended up it took 20 years to pay off that debt to the tune of up to $880 million a year. As recently as 2019, there was $558 million in recovery bonds still outstanding. That should not happen again. Mayor de Blasio in 2020 attempted to repeat that and sought state authority to issue $5 billion in bonds to cover anticipated revenue shortfalls due to the COVID crisis. That proposal was slow-walked, sidetracked by then Governor Cuomo, and ultimately proved moot because of all the federal aid the city got. But the precedent is there, and that door should be shut. And the way to do it is easy. There should be a provision, an added provision of the charter that reads as follows. Proceeds of long-term bonds and notes shall in no case be used to pay for operating expenses, period, full stop. I'll conclude there. Thank you for the
Thank you very
opportunity,
much.
and I look forward to answering any questions.
Thank you. Professor Mitchell-Moss, it's always a pleasure to see you.
Thank you, Chairman Cicera. I just want to thank the members of the panel for inviting me, and I just also want to acknowledge my friend, Anthony Crowell, the president and dean of New York Law School, for making this space available for this hearing. My name is Mitchell Moss. I have been a resident of New York for most of my life. I've been teaching at NYU since 1973, including the past 53 years courses on New York City. And I just want to say that I'm a graduate of every public school I ever attended in New York, Public School 3, Public School 157 at Forest Hills High School. And my message is very simple. It's going to be very brief, and I'm going to live within the 3-minute time limit. We cannot take the strength of the city's economy for granted. We've been living in unusual times. We had the benefit of Nancy Pelosi giving $5 billion to the city of New York, which the previous mayor found a way to spend as quickly as he could. We also have benefited from a almost 0% interest rate, which has allowed revenues to boom as well as the equity market. And I think we should be recognizing that these special moments are not going to continue forever. Simply put, we need a new culture of fiscal prudence in making any commitments to spend funds collected by those who work here, live here, study here, shop here, and visit. Because $80 billion, according to the New York City Office of Management Budget, $80 billion is money that we collect. We get very little from the federal government. And despite all the attention on who the president is and the members of the Congress, they only give us about $10 billion a year, and the state gives us about $20 billion, and that's all categorical money. So the future is in our hands, not who we elect to go to Washington. And I think this is very important and why the mayor is such a pivotal force in determining the future of the city. So if you can recognize that the federal spending for the pandemic, which helped us immensely, is over or just about over, and that we're not going to see that repeat itself in the near term, question is, what should we do? And let me say, Albany faced much tougher times than the city because Albany is dependent almost 2/3 on the income tax. It's a much narrower fiscal base. It's much more fragile. It's not as well run as the city, which is why New York City has much more people working in the government than in the state of New York. And that's true if you just look at the state rules and what they pay. I'm not even going to go into this anymore. I'm not even talking about living in Albany. Okay. Now, what do we mean by fiscal prudence? I think it has to be a core value. You can't put it into the charter, but it's got to be a core value underlying any time we decide to expand or launch a new program. The Citizen Budget Commission, we've heard today, has talked about the importance of having stronger methods of identifying the fiscal impact of new spending. I have a suggestion that's simpler. We cannot allow the people who propose spending to judge its impact. This is not something that's so profound. If someone's going to say we need this, we should have someone decide whether it's warranted and what the cost will be. And by doing that, I suggest we have the Office of Management Budget and the IBO, two organizations which don't agree on many things, be involved in reviewing what the city council wants to do. Rather than let the city council determine what to do and how to spend it, we should have an independent city agency, two city agencies, be involved in making sure that that spending is prudent. This allows us to do it without hiring new outside consultants or contractors or professional experts, but by simply using the brains we have on the city payroll to make sure that the energy and talent of the city council is allowed to work its will without any constraint. The second point I want to make, and this is a little different, is this. The Office of Management Budget does a phenomenal job presenting the budget and then reviewing it and projecting the revenues, and you've heard this already. I believe we don't do enough, though. We should determine what is the share of the city's spending as a share of the total city's economic product. In other words, we shouldn't allow spending by the city government to grow faster than the economy of the city as a whole, because we depend on that economy to pay for the police, to pay for 1 billion gallons of water delivered every day, to educate 900,000 students, to provide 1.5 million emergency medical calls, and to operate 30,000 acres of public parks, 6,000 streets, and about 879 bridges. Simply put, we are dependent upon the economy which generates the revenue, and that has to be considered, so we cannot be growing our expenses faster than the sources which are the economy itself. And how do we do this? I want to propose that we draw upon the City University of New York's Institute for State and Local Finance, run by former Commissioner of Corrections Michael Jacobson and former Deputy Mayor Mark Shaw, to provide the technical expertise working with OMB to provide this analysis required every year in January when the mayor presents his budget. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay, this was a lot to take in. I'm going to turn it over to anyone who has questions, but I think you gave us some homework to do this weekend.
I just had a question. If you could just expand on the retiree health benefits trust. I think we were talking about the benefits and how the city makes a payment based on what it used for the year and then the excess money, how that.
So the Retiree Health Benefits Trust in concept is a trust so that the city puts in money to pay for retiree health benefits. You work for the city, you get retiree health benefits. I'm eligible, thank you. And every year when current workers are working, they're getting rights to benefits that'll be paid later. So the conceptual idea is let's fill up this trust akin to a pension fund so that when those bills come due, it's not how we use it. We basically use it just to pay each year's bill, every year. At a certain point, those bills are going to go up and we have that big liability and something that's going to really hit the operating budget. The way it's structured, though, because we couldn't have a real rainy day fund until it was created in the last Charter Revision Commission, is Mayor Bloomberg, Mayor de Blasio used it as a rainy day fund because they didn't have another thing. What we're saying now that we have a rainy day fund, let's not use it that way. Let's use it for its purpose. And it costs a lot of money to fill up that fund every year. Right. Let's pay the current bill, and then let's add a little more. And over time, we can start to build up that fund so that when those retirees need those benefits, the money's there, and you're not hitting that year's city's tax base exponentially just to pay for, your kids, the teacher you had in first grade.
Got it.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So I have a question for Professor Moss. Your trigger of OMB and IBO Do you have a numerical amount? Are you sticking with the 100 million, as a few people said already?
You know, I have to know my limits. I'll let the bookkeepers next to me handle
Okay.
that.
Great. And then Mr. McMahon, 217C, which you spoke about.
Right.
Would you eliminate that with your wording that you
No.
closed with?
I would just add to it.
So you would keep 217C?
It would be deliberate redundancy,
I'm sorry?
deliberate redundancy. Just to make it crystal clear, you should not do this.
Got it.
Do not borrow your way into insolvency,
Got it. I
or
think we
risk
could,
it, rather.
we could all agree we never want a repeat of the 1970s. So, okay, any other questions? I imagine that we will hear some follow-up, particularly from you,
We will
Andrew.
provide some follow-up,
Yeah.
some detail.
And
language
we
to help
may
you
have you
more
back.
specific.
We may have you back again.
Anything we can do to help.
I appreciate you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, I believe our city controller, Brad Lander, has joined us. So Controller Lander, your timing is actually impeccable.
No shock, but good to see.
We are ready whenever you are.
Dynamite. Just get my testimony up here. All right. Good evening, and thank you to Chair Shasura and all the members of the Charter Revision Commission, including many friends. I'm grateful for the opportunity to testify before you tonight. I'm New York City Controller Brad Lander, charged with the responsibility of being a steward of the city's fiscal health and attending to its fiscal responsibility. And so I'm especially grateful to be here tonight to testify on that theme. I'll be outlining 5 proposals to strengthen the city's fiscal management, all of which are in this report, which we've just given to you guys that we released last week. These proposals would ensure that we, 1, accumulate sufficient reserves for times of economic recession, as you heard on the last panel. 2, run city agencies more efficiently while avoiding cuts to essential services. 3, maintain the affordability of the city's debt. 4, overhaul our capital planning for a range of reasons to better face the future given the aging infrastructure and the era of the climate crisis. And 5th, start paying our vendors, including our MWBEs and our nonprofit human service providers, on time. I won't read everything that's in my written testimony, which you have before you in addition to the report. But I think it is just worth noting here we are just about 5 decades on from the fiscal crisis. Next year will be the 50th anniversary. That was caused in part by changes in the broader global economy, but in part by the city's own weaknesses in its fiscal management. We did not know what resources were coming in and what obligations we had. Coming out of that, as a result of the Financial Emergency Act, a really sound set of fiscal management practices were put in place that have served us very well for the last 50 years. But 50 years later, it's time to take a serious look at what 21st century fiscal management should look like. And that really is what we detail here. So first builds, and 3 of them are pretty close to what Citizens Budget Commission is proposing, so I won't go into excruciating detail. But number 1 is to, in the charter, require the adoption of a rainy day fund policy to make sure that there's a clear target for where it's supposed to be and a formula for annual contributions and rules for withdrawals, rather than leaving that to the vicissitudes of each annual budget negotiation. What we're proposing is that you say in the charter, the city, the mayor, the council, and the controller have to work together to adopt that policy. We have made recommendations for what the policy should be, but I don't think you should put the policy in the charter. I think you should mandate the development of a policy. Our proposal is sufficient reserves for the length of an average recession, so you could get through a recession. That would be 16% of revenues. We propose a deposit formula that's a little complicated, but that would automate when you've got a little more tax revenue each year, half of it would go into reserves automatically. And so you build up the reserves without having to have the council and the mayor kind of fighting it out about what that should be. And third, that you only do withdrawals in periods of general recession. And you can see our proposal in detail. But what we propose is that you mandate the establishment of a formula and some rules, because right now the voters said, let's create a rainy day fund, but there's no requirements to actually fill it up. So it's like a kind of half-empty vessel with no clarity about how things get in it or how things get out of it. Second, we propose a formula for a better way of looking at city savings programs. The way that the budget process works under the Fiscal Emergency Act, there's 4 adjustments each year, and the rules for what has to be in them is pretty straightforward, but it doesn't include savings and efficiencies. And so mayors at their own essentially kind of whim or decision decide when to do PEG announcements, programs to eliminate the gap, but it's not on any predictable time horizon. And so they often come at the last minute. There's 2 weeks. Agencies, give us your savings. And it doesn't allow commissioners to do long-term planning. There's no incentives to think over a few years and try to come up with things that actually will save money in the long term, to think, what could we do less of? I know what I'd like to do more of. If I could phase this down, I can phase that up. So we outline a way that that could be built into the budgeting process to help us achieve savings without cutting essential services. And one part of that is to require that agencies have on their budgets the claims that the city pays out as a result of harms caused by those agencies. Right now, if it's a traffic crash caused by a city vehicle or an incident of police misconduct, those are paid out of the general fund. If you moved responsibility for those payments onto the books of the city agency, then they would have a financial incentive to bring them down. They could keep some of the savings and invest them in programs that they believe are needed and save the city money. Third is a proposal to address debt affordability that I'm not going to go into in detail here, but basically we have a debt management policy that we shouldn't spend more than 15% of our annual budget on debt service, because we need the rest for our teachers and our firefighters and our social services and our public safety, but there's no clear policy for actually maintaining it. We have a proposal for how to guarantee that we stay below 15% of our spending on debt service that could be put in the charter and would help make sure that works over time. Fourth, and Chair, I know this one will be close to your heart, is to overhaul our approach to infrastructure and capital planning. Right now, honestly, we have no idea what it would cost to put our infrastructure in the state of good repair. We do an annual.
A lot of money.
A lot of money. But we spend a lot of money on an annual assessment that doesn't tell us anything. The Ames report is, we did an audit of it. It's basically totally worthless. And some of that is because of what's required by the charter and not required by the charter. So you could adjust the charter to require an assessment that's actually usable in the budget, and a budget that sets priorities instead of being kind of an agency laundry list. And we detail in here, there's the Government Finance Officers Association and the Municipal Financial Officers Association have a set of best practices that we believe the city should adopt. And last but not least is to mandate timeframes for each stage of the procurement process. I don't know how many people of you or how many people in this room have done city procurement with a nonprofit or an MWBE, but the average nonprofit contract is not registered, doesn't arrive at my office for registration until 10 months after its effective date. It's really unconscionable. It's bad financial practice. We, by the charter, have a 30-day deadline for registering or returning a contract, and we've done over 30,000 contracts just in this term, the last 3 years, and we've met our 30-day timeline on every single one. No one else in the process has a mandated timeline, and so they go over. So our proposal here is that the charter would mandate that the Procurement Policy Board set timelines for each step of the process so that we can hold the agencies themselves, the contracting agencies, DOE and all the others, and the oversight agencies, Mayor's Office of Contract Services, Office of Management and Budget, and the Law Department, accountable to timeframes, just like we're accountable to one. Maybe no one loves getting assigned a deadline, but nothing compels you to hit a deadline like having one. I'm happy to talk in any questions about it. We think those are good, concrete proposals, all actionable with charter action and all real concrete steps forward to stronger fiscal management. I will say on the way in, Barbara Blair gave me her testimony on the city's fair share policies, which are really land use and not fiscal, but I wholeheartedly endorse what she is proposing on the land use side on a better fair share policy. And I thank you for the opportunity
Great
this evening.
Controller, always a pleasure to see you. So I have, by the way, I think, first of all, let me compliment you because these are very, very well thought out. And I think for those of us that live in different jobs and organizations, we've been affected by one or more of these in our professional worlds and personal worlds. I have a question about number 1 and 5, and I want to make sure I'm clear. On both, are you suggesting that we put in the charter language that there should be a rainy day policy and language that there should be timeframes in your 5th point on the way you have 30 days on other agencies? But are you saying that we just do that
Assign
without?
clear responsibility for promulgating the policy. So you
So you're
could
not saying
mandate.
for us to write the
You aren't going to
policy?
be able to know how long it should take
Right.
the law department versus the OMB to sign off. So the proposal would be for number 5 to require that the procurement policy board promulgate deadlines by some date for each of the contracting and oversight agencies and report, regularly, quarterly, annually, in real time on how the agencies are doing at hitting theirs. And then similarly for the rainy day fund policy to require, we propose that the mayor, the council, and the controller set policy. Now, the mayor and the council would do things through their normal process, how you would include the controller in that. We'd be glad just to give our ideas. So.
Great. Any questions, comments?
Hi.
Great to see you, Mama Dukes.
Over the years from small nonprofit groups,
Yeah.
way before your time, it's been reoccurred in our community, the nonprofits. They go in their pockets and pay. Yeah, you said you have a 30-day in your office.
So
You have 10 days from the time to the contract is to be implemented before, thank you, Mr. Chair. Before these persons get paid. Because and I want to piggyback on what my colleague said. We have people bidding vendors in the city for thousands of years, ever since we had a city. Do they have to have the same kind of scrutiny that people who are new coming in?
Well, so, we obviously give more scrutiny to a vendor the first time that we're contracting with them than when we're renewing and have a track record. But there's integrity reviews even if you get your contract renewed. Yeah, so we have over the years, unfortunately, built up a system in which most of our contracts are not registered for payment. So the charter provides, you got an agency, whatever it is, Department of Youth and Community Development enters into a contract with you. You might have responded to an RFP or, there's various other procurement methods. They say we want to enter into a contract with you. That takes a while for them to negotiate the contract, but you'll get that contract negotiated. That might be, so they say, oh, good news, the council allocated some money. Part of the problem is you only find out in June, find out June 28th, the council allocated you some money, but the year starts July 1st. And so now you're kind of already behind the 8 ball. And then by the time you get your award letter, it's September. And then by the time the Department of Youth and Community Development sends you a draft contract, it's October or November. And then you say, well, you got this part wrong. We're doing this service, not that service. And by the time they finalize the contract with you, it's January. You still got to be providing the work starting back last July because it all has to be provided in that year. And now it goes to the law department and they take a while because they don't have a time deadline. And then it goes to the mayor's office of contract services and it goes to OMB. Used to be on big contracts, OMB reviewed it twice. Well, we got one of those removed. And then eventually it gets to my office for registration. No one in the process up to the point I've just described has any deadline requirements. Once it gets to our office, there is a charter requirement that we, once it's submitted to us, review it, register it, or return it because it's flawed. But 99% of them get registered, but we have returned some significant ones because they were procured improperly within 30 days. And we've done every one of the 30,000 we've received in 30 days. I got a staff that does it. They're good. I watch a dashboard. We make sure it happens. But there's no timelines on anybody else in the process. So yes, what we're proposing is that you mandate the Procurement Policy Board to set timelines for the other procuring and oversight agencies. That won't always, obviously, if you only know you got the money from the council on June 28th and the council starts on July 1st, it's going to be take a couple of months for that, but it could be 3 months instead of 10 months. And yes, that would save many organizations. It affects nonprofits, but it also really affects our minority and women-owned businesses who also are not strongly capitalized. And if they get a contract, can't wait 10 months, so they got to go get a loan. Maybe the bank's charging them a ton of interest. So yes, and you'll find if you talk to basically any nonprofit or any MWBE that does business with the city,
I hear it all the time.
Yes.
Yes. So I have.
I just want to thank you for I'm sorry, go ahead. I'll yield to Jay.
Thank you. Your testimony, thank you for your testimony. And we hear you. But Hazel asked a great question, because what about the new, do this go for the new vendors or the ones that's established? Is it a difference? Do they get different treatment? That is very important to know.
There's not a different legal treatment. I mean, so there's many different procurement methods. The city might put out an RFP and multiple bidders bid. But there's something called non-competitive small procurement for MWBE specifically, up to now $1.5 million, where if an agency knows a qualified MWBE, they can hire them for a qualified service without going out to bid. So if you've got an RFP, everybody has to comply with the same rules and they all get vetted. If you use one of those other procurement methods, it's much more likely to be a vendor that the city agency has used before. The procurement process then is the same. There's a what used to be called Vendex, the integrity reviews, and everyone has to do that, new or old. Now, if your Vendex forms are already on file with the city, you don't have to file new ones. So there's some steps you can skip if you're already in the system. But for each individual contract, it still has to go through this process.
Yes, I have two questions. So thank you, Controller. So the rainy day money, where would that rainy day money come from? Is it a process where it will be put aside? And what would the rainy day money be used for? That's one part too.
Yeah. So the idea of a rainy day fund is, in my opinion, that it should be for times of economic recession. You build up a budget that's got, teachers and police officers and firefighters and social workers and H&H nurses, and you got a head count, and that's and then, that's kind of always trending up, and that's fine as long as your revenues are trending up as they are right now. Then you hit a recession and your revenues go down, but you have that workforce and the services that you're obligated to provide. And for that period of time of recession, you're in trouble. And so if you've saved to have savings to replace revenue when it goes down, now you can cover a recession and you don't have to be laying off teachers just at the moment when your city's in recession. It's not easy to do that because in each year, you'd rather spend that money on your many other needs. You need affordable housing and you need public safety, and you don't really want to put money away for a rainy day because you need it now. But if you don't put it away for the rainy day, when that recession comes, you're really going to be at the worst time having to cut. So
And we have seen rain.
yes,
We
no,
have
no, we've
seen
had
rain.
this, I mean, we've all been through periods when there did have to be layoffs or hard cuts at exactly the worst times when people need more services and you want the city to keep investing. So the idea is you build up those reserves. We weren't allowed to do it. We didn't have a policy that allowed the city to save, which I know sounds weird, but there's like weird accounting rules. And until 2019, when the state legislature and the previous Charter Revision Commission authorized a rainy day fund. So now we have the fund, but we don't have any rules for putting money in it or how big it's supposed to get. Our proposal is just that you say those rules have to be set. We think the rules should be the target size, should be what's necessary to get the city through the length of an average recession based on the ones that we've had over the last 50 years. And our proposal for how much to put in is basically you look at, your revenues and what you projected. And when your tax revenues for things other than property taxes, your sales tax, your business tax, your income tax, when they go over what you had in previous years, that's new money. Take half that new money and put it in your rainy day fund. You can still spend the other half on new needs, but you didn't have to cut anything. You even have a little more to spend in good times, but half of it automatically goes into your rainy day fund. It'll build up over time. You don't have to leave it to the council and the mayor. Look, when you get to the end of the budget process and they're fighting over, like what council and mayor are going to be like, what we should do with that last 500 million is put it in the rainy day fund. They're going to say, no, our kids need this. Our neighborhoods need that, but then you won't have it in your rainy day fund. So a formula like the one I have described, you don't have to cut anything, but you don't have to leave it to politics it's like an automatic savings program. You do a payroll deduction. You say, just take it before I even see it. Please put it in my savings account. So I'm not tempted to spend it and then it'll be there when I need it.
Great.
Thank you so much. And the other question is, you mentioned about some of the different agencies down, your agency, it takes you 30 days. That's what your policy in place.
Usually
to
17. Our average is 17 days, but our deadline is
So what
30.
are you asking the Charter Commission to do? Are you asking us to, that all the other agencies have that same policy? So some agencies might not suffer and lose their non-for-profits because it takes them 9 months. You mentioned sometime it make time 9 months or so. And the ones that really suffer in this process is Black and brown organizations with very low budgets and some of the marginalized communities. So that is a big concern to me.
I'm recommending that there's a entity called the Procurement Policy Board, which is 3 mayoral reps and 2 comptroller reps, and it sets procurement policy. You could mandate them to set specific timelines for each of the agencies within the procurement process. It's a little different if you're actually the agency developing the contract. You need longer than the law department does to review it. And I don't think the Charter Revision Commission can, in the time you have, figure out how many days for each agency. But you could mandate the Procurement Policy Board by a date, a reasonable date, give them I'm a member of the Procurement Policy Board, mandate the Procurement Policy Board to set those timelines.
Great.
Yep, perfect.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Well, thank you, Mr. Controller, for your testimony. I appreciate your thinking and your proposals on particularly 1 and 5. We all know that when we get into crisis, that the easiest way to deal with the fiscal emergencies is to lay off city employees who are providing much needed, as you pointed out, services to the city. So I appreciate your thinking there. And also on number 5, because MWBEs are challenged with not necessarily all well-heeled and can withstand the long process that it takes to get them paid. And that is a problem that needs to be looked at and also corrected. You pointed out very aptly that, they sometimes are forced to go to banks to take loans in order to survive. And those loans, the interest rates of those loans could do more harm to them than good. And so your office has, and I commend you, has done an excellent job at turning over and registering these contracts on a timely basis. I think everyone should be held to the same high standard. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Comptroller Lander, we appreciate
An
you
honor to
taking the
appear before
time.
you. Thank you very much.
We may have some follow-up questions
Great,
for
we'll be
you.
happy to talk.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to call up 3 speakers at a time. Jean Victor, Erica Vladimir, and Barbara Blair. And while you 3 are coming up, I know that we have council member and former borough president Gail Brewer on the Zoom. So Councilmember Brewer, I'm going to have you jump in. I know you've got probably 20 things on tonight. So we really appreciate you jumping on.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I am going between events and I will provide testimony. I think you're having 2 per borough. So I will be better equipped at the next meeting to be able to participate in a meaningful way. But I appreciate the opportunity just to jump in to let you know I'm paying attention. And so far the testimony has been excellent. I have to say, having been through a lot of charters myself, I do think that hopefully you will take everybody's suggestions and focus on, a variety of topics. Now, in terms of the city council, we have another topic that we want to discuss, but I hope that you will take all of this seriously, and I think you will. Thank you very much, and I look forward to the next meeting.
Councilman Brewer, thank you. It's always a pleasure to see you. Okay, why don't I start with Barbara?
Okay. Good evening, Mr. Chair and the committee. My name's Barbara Blair. I'm the president of the Garment District Alliance. The most recent New York City Charter was passed in November 2019 with a serious omission. It recognized but did not codify the concept of fair share for all our communities by removing loopholes that allow for bad faith placement of challenging facilities. Fair share was intended to establish criteria that would foster the equitable citywide distribution of assets to a community, such as open space, parks, and other positive community services, while preventing the clustering of undesirable uses, such as methadone clinics, needle exchanges, shelters, and other social service entities that serve challenged communities. In addition to not adhering to the concepts of fair share, the city has also failed to provide a basic level of transparency about the concentration of services or any public outreach required by the city charter. The New York City Charter has a mandate to locate city services and facilities in an equitable way. A recent audit and report from the New York City Comptroller, Brad Lander, found that the city unevenly distributed city facilities while keeping critical data on the concentration of services in neighborhoods unavailable and failing to produce mandated analysis of neighborhood impact. The Garment District Alliance requests that this committee ensure that fair share is codified in a public planning and approval process. We ask that the City Charter Revision Committee establish clear centralized city oversight over fair share compliance, improve and regularly update the fair share criteria, improve public access to information on sightings, facility capacity, and concentration, reform the citywide statement of needs, prohibit unfair sightings in oversaturated districts through a local law that amends the New York City Charter to reduce overconcentration of city facilities in certain community districts, include the siting of a city facility or facility contracted by the city to perform services on their behalf or otherwise receiving any city financial contribution of support, including emergency contracted facilities in any community district highly concentrated with such facilities. An agency proposing a siting could overcome the prohibition by demonstrating the facility services the needs of the population in the immediate geographic community, except where the need was created by an unfair concentration of similar existing facilities. Unlike applications for liquor and cannabis licenses, which are subject to community reviews that consider all elements of the immediate area, social service providers are not subjected to such a review. We hope this committee will correct this situation, and I thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Great to see you. Erica.
Hello, everybody. Commissioners, thank you so much for hosting these hearings and the opportunity for the public to testify. My name is Erica Vladimir. By day, I'm a nonprofit communications professional. In my free time, I am a co-founder of the New York State Sexual Harassment Working Group. I am a New York State Democratic State Committee member for the 76th Assembly District. I am active in the Four Freedoms Democratic Club on the Upper East Side, and I am called the best aunt ever. So I have three proposals that I want to share with you. I'm not going to go in great detail, and I will be submitting written testimony that will have more detail. Happy to answer any questions you might have or follow up before you have to submit your recommendations in August. So first, the mayor has specifically asked the commission to look at public safety and fiscal management. And so my proposal is that the Civilian Complaint Review Board should have an independent budget that is not tied to political negotiations between the mayor and city council. We already see this with the Independent Budget Office, which gets a set percentage of OMB's budget every year. I believe that the Civilian Complaint Review Board budget should be tied to the NYPD budget. Second, New York City has taken considerable strides in protecting workers against harassment and discrimination. There is still a lot of work to be done in all spaces, but as someone who is a co-founder of the Sexual Harassment Working Group, I would like to propose something that is more focused on public servants. I would like to propose an independent investigatory body that reviews harassment and discrimination claims against elected and appointed officials. We understand that there is a unique power dynamic, especially if a staffer is going to come forward. And right now, in certain situations, you have colleagues who have to investigate their colleagues for such types of claims. This is not independent. Other things such as politics always get in the way as much as we don't want them to, and we say they don't. They do, and it can create conflicts of interest, and the process itself might not be the priority. This is something that I've been working and fighting for on the state level. I know that there are some city council members who are calling for this as well, but this would be a great opportunity to make sure that we don't lose public servants who are leaving the public workforce because of the type of harassment and discrimination that's inflicted upon them by folks who are higher up than them. And then finally, I believe that we can create a better line of succession from the mayoralty should that need to be considered. So right now, if the mayor resigns or is no longer mayor, the public advocate is the one who becomes mayor. But their ideologies, the way they want to run the city don't always align, right? They are elected separately. But that can cause chaos and dysfunction at a time when the city needs stability, when we are transitioning to someone else being in charge. And so I believe that, we most often see mayors put their first deputy mayor in charge if they're leaving on a trip or something like that. Why not have the first deputy mayor be the person who's next in line in succession? And yes, most people would argue, but they're not elected, and you're right. So why don't we follow the federal government and have the first deputy mayor run on a ticket with the mayor, similar to president and vice president? This way, we know that this is someone who the mayor or the candidate at hand will trust and will be able to create continuity instead of chaos in case the mayor needs to resign or is just no longer fit for office. So thank you very much. Those are my
Thank you very
proposals.
much.
Good evening, Chair Cicero, Vice Chair Dukes, and all of the members of the New York City Charter Revision Commission. Thank you for allowing me to speak on behalf of the New York City Equal Employment Practices Commission. I'm the Executive Director, Jean Victor, and my office supports our board, Chair Aldrin Benia, Vice Chair Elaine Reese, Commissioner Manaska Alcantara, Commissioner Nicole Yearwood, and Commissioner Ngozi Okaro. This year marks the 35th anniversary of the creation of the Equal Employment Practices Commission, or we call it the EEPC. The EEPC was created in 1989 by an amendment to the city charter, specifically Charter Chapter 36, as an independent, non-mayoral city agency empowered to audit and evaluate the employment practices and procedures of city agencies and their efforts to ensure fair and effective equal employment opportunities for people of color and women who are either employees or applicants for employment with the city. The EEPC currently audits the EEO programs of 143 city agencies. In addition, we're charged with conducting a 10-year study of the underutilization of women and people of color in the city's workforce. This is pursuant to Local Law 13 of 2019. We've completed 4 years of Local Law 13 reports, which may be found on our website. Although the EEPC performs its functions, its continued success and our ability to look more deeply into audits and our Local Law 13 analyses and mandates is hampered by questions regarding our lack of enforcement power, our questions of jurisdiction and independence, and a lack of secure and an autonomous budget. To address these areas of concern, a brief summary of the proposed change as follows. I'm only proposing 3 changes. 1, fiscal independence. When I came on board 3 years ago, the EEPC had a head count of 14. It was cut down to 12, so we're very small. Over the last few years, the EEPC's budget has been essentially flat, with the exception of the recent pegs that were assessed against it, and of course, the loss of headcount. This has caused us to struggle to fulfill our charter mandate. In addition, Local Law 13 requires the EEPC to make legislative, regulatory, and budgetary recommendations to the Department of Citywide Administrative Services, the Office of the Mayor, and the New York City Council. The EEPC is asking to change the charter in order to properly establish and preserve independence in its budget structure by using a comparative appropriations model similar to the fiscal structure of the Independent Budget Office. In our case, we've compared our functions to that of the New York City Controller due to its similarity in independence and its duty to audit the programs and activities of each city entity. Similar to the New York City Comptroller, the EEPC is charged with safeguarding the city from quote-unquote fraud, waste, and abuse in employment practices. The proposed strategy of anchoring the amount of the EEPC's budget to a set percentage of that of the New York City Comptroller will stabilize the fiscal structure of the EEPC and its ability to operate independently, thus providing the City of New York with a consistent and well-run EEO program across all city entities. Number 2 is additional enforcement measures. The EEPC's enforcement authority is currently limited to publishing a report and recommending to the mayor the appropriate corrective action the EEPC deems necessary to ensure compliance with the city charter provisions. Such a repercussion for failure to implement assigned corrective actions creates minimal consequences for noncompliance, especially for non-mayoral entities. The proposed language of Section 832C strengthens the EEPC's enforcement authority by permitting it to recommend budgetary consequences for an entity's failure to correct areas of EEO noncompliance. And lastly, jurisdiction. Throughout the years, a considerable amount of the EEPC's time has been spent responding to challenges pertaining to its authority and jurisdiction. To provide clarity and avert jurisdictional arguments, the definition of agency established in City Charter Section 831 warrants additional clarification and a clearer delineation of those entities subject to the EEPC's authority. The additional language proposed is consistent with criteria applied in New York City Corporation Council Opinion Number 11-90 and subsequent opinions which examined whether and to what extent the provisions of City Charter Chapter 36 extend to which governmental entities. While these charter changes are relatively minor, we believe that they will have a significant impact towards helping to ensure that city entities establish and maintain a fair and equitable workplace. We believe that such actions will do more to address inequities in the workplace, reduce litigation and the resulting settlements and judgments that ultimately draw city funds away from the city's priorities. For these reasons, we believe that such minor changes to the charter make good fiscal sense for the city. Thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you very much. Do you have any comments or questions? Yes, sir.
I have one, thank you. I apologize, I had to step out of the room, nature called. But the young woman in the middle who I didn't catch your name because I was out of the room. I just had a quick question on the CCRB separate, being adjoined to the PD budget. I don't quite understand the rationale behind that. So could you elaborate on why you think that's necessary for the watchdog group?
Yeah,
to be attached to
absolutely.
the-
So the Civilian Complaint Review Board is tasked with holding NYPD accountable. And one of the things that we can do to keep New Yorkers safe is to make sure that the NYPD is following through with any orders and maintaining safety as opposed to harming New York City residents. Because they are, in its essence, tasked with supporting and helping to keep New York City residents safe, I believe that the CCRB should have their funding tied to what the NYPD's budget is. I don't want to give a percentage because that's just not my wheelhouse. I'm not an economist. I went to law school, so I don't have to work with numbers. But, I think it's similar to the way that the Independent Budget Office is tied to OMB. What they provide is a little different, but it is still in the same purview of what the city is asking for them to do.
Okay, I hear you. I'm just struggling with the connection between CCRB's budget and oversight of PD and attaching them to the PD's budget. I'm somehow missing the relevance. of
I see
why.
them as both public safety agencies. And so, again, if you all were tasked with looking at these proposals, if you have something I would love to hear or discuss at a later date of how we can just ensure that CCRB's budget remains consistent and independent from political negotiations. Right now, from 2023 to 2024, their budget went down by $1.4 million. And yet we are seeing the rise in lawsuits against the NYPD to increase, which means that there probably needs to be some more level of accountability. We shouldn't be taking an oversight and an accountability agency's funding away from them when they are tasked with that level of accountability.
That I get. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Howard Slotkin. David Schwartz and Layla Law Gisico. I hope I got that right. So we've got Howard Slotkin, David Schwartz.
Oh, it's no order, okay.
Okay, Howard.
Good evening, Chair.
We're going to ask again if you can try and be within 3 minutes.
Absolutely. I thank you for the opportunity to testify this evening. Howard Slack, I'm the Executive Director of Citizens Housing and Planning Council, a nonprofit organization dedicated to the well-being of the city's housing stock and the people it serves. I will spend my 3 minutes talking about the need for a candid accounting of costs imposed by government actions, in particular on the creation and operation of housing. As noted by others in their thoughtful remarks earlier in this hearing, the charter today contains requirements for fiscal impact statements estimating the effect of new legislation on city revenues and expenditures. And as noted, these statements lack not only teeth, but also relevance to decisions. They're produced after public hearings and debate on legislation, and they're frequently, I will say, fudged, ascribing zero fiscal impact to bills that do demand significant agency resources and reduce agency capacity for other important business. As a result, these statements are widely ignored, and we're effectively covering our eyes and ears about the true cost of implementing these laws and the capacity of agencies to do all the work that they need to do. The impact of these statements would be improved by requiring publication of the statement prior to a hearing on the legislation or other means of improved transparency or consequences for inadequate statements. And I know that others have recommended some thoughtful ideas on this subject. But I also want to talk about that you've heard several speakers observe that housing and housing affordability is one of the greatest challenges that the city faces today. And a similar lack of transparency is helping to fuel our housing affordability crisis. We've been using our housing stock in a way as a credit card on which we charge the costs of other public policy goals without attention to the size of the bill or ultimately who pays it. When laws or rules add costs to building and operating housing, they contribute to rising rents, deferred maintenance, and reduced resident services. This poses a particular risk for affordable housing and supportive housing, which cannot raise rents to cover the higher costs they may face. While rising construction costs may have many causes, they are a key driver of our housing shortage and affordability crisis. Every dollar of increase in these costs decreases the amount of affordable housing the city's budget can support and further limits private housing construction to the sort of product that can be marketed to a luxury audience. Of course, laws and regulations do advance important goals for safety, sustainability, consumer protection, and numerous other public purposes, but ignoring their financial consequences prevents thoughtful policy design that would limit the adverse effects on residents and people who are seeking housing. For instance, recently enacted changes to construction site safety requirements can add as much as $17,000 per unit to the cost of new mid-rise apartment buildings. Whether that's important or not, those are the kind of sound decisions that can only be made about trade-offs if they're disclosed in a clear and timely manner for decision makers to consider. The Commission should consider amending the charter to require something similar, a housing financial impact assessment, prior to public hearing for legislative or rulemaking decisions that would impose significant costs on the construction and operation of housing in order to provide a general accounting of these costs. The purpose would be to inform debate and decisions, enable the housing budget to go further, and prevent our city from stumbling deeper into a housing crisis.
Thank you very much. David?
Hello, I'm David Schwartz. I'm a New York lawyer, but I'm here on behalf of the New York Association of Wholesalers and Distributors. New York State, over the last 15 years, has lost $30 billion due to untaxed cigarettes, illegal untaxed cigarettes. New York City, over the last 15 years, has lost $10 billion. It's roughly a third of the state. $10 billion due to untaxed illegal cigarettes coming up the I-95 corridor every day, millions and millions and millions of cigarettes coming up. So what I'm going to talk about today, and I could talk about a lot of topics, but what I'm going to talk about today is very germane to the issue of this hearing today. I applaud Mayor Adams. He's the first mayor to take some steps to stop this problem with the Smoke Out Act that was passed in the New York State budget. Sheriff Miranda is doing a great job getting out there every single day, but he has limited resources. And so far, we have thousands, as you know, because we all know, because we walk through the streets of the city of New York, we have thousands of illegal stores. Now, the focus has been on marijuana, illegal cannabis, but those stores are criminal enterprises. They're selling illegal cigarettes, untaxed illegal cigarettes. They're selling illegal, untaxed vapor products. So although we've closed down now, I think a couple hundred stores, we have a long way to go. And the problem won't stop once we close down these stores because they're coming up by the millions up this I-95 corridor. The other thing that these illegal untaxed cigarettes does, not just the budgetary point of view to the billions of dollars. They have been, it's been
So
shown.
I wanna interrupt because time is fleeting.
Yeah.
But I want you to tell us what you'd like the charter.
Okay, what I'd like the charter, what I'd like the commission to do, number one is we're down, cigarette licenses, we're down from 10,000 to 4,990. That's the exact amount of illegal shops that have opened up. So I have people complaining, bodega owners, newsstands, little grocery stores. That's who it's affecting. I have them complaining every single day that they're only selling 6 cartons when the illegal store is selling 40 cartons. So what I would like the commission to do is to mandate that we get back to a normal amount of cigarette licenses, because if we're going to have cigarettes sold in the city of New York, they should be sold at legal stores, legal brick and mortar stores in the city of New York. So we need to not get rid of that moratorium that's on cigarette licenses right now by Consumer Protection and get it back up to 10,000. We need to invest resources into stopping these cigarettes coming up I-95 from North Carolina, whose tax is $4 per carton. Ours is $68.50. We need to invest resources, law enforcement resources, in stopping that. It's not going to cost you a dime. It's going to give us billions of dollars in revenue. Yeah, we're going to spend a little bit of money on enforcement, but it's going to be well worth it stopping it at the source coming into the city of New York. Because if we close down all these shops, we'll go back to illegal cigarettes being sold in the back of trunks. And we don't want that either. We want to stop this problem. And those are 2 ideas that I think we can use to stop the problem.
Right.
And what I'll do is I found
you
out
could
about this
draft something, yeah.
hearing at the last minute. I apologize, Chairman, and I'll draft a memo outlining certain ideas.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Chairman and members of the Charter Revision Commission, and thank you for the opportunity. My name is Leila Logizico. I am the president of the City Club of New York. The City Club of New York is a civic organization founded in 1892, and our mission is to advocate for sound urban policies and good government. Before I go into my testimony, I would like to second the comments that were made by Assemblymember Glick earlier tonight. I agree with her that the communication about the hearings from the commission are not as broadly advertised as they could. And I really urge the commission, for example, to publish all the upcoming meetings with the dates and locations. Right now, there's only this meeting that is advertised. It would be immensely helpful to know and understand when the further, the subsequent meetings and hearings will happen and in which boroughs.
Just for clarification, we've announced through the end of June the meeting schedule.
Oh,
So it should be out
great.
there. Yeah.
That is
But
fantastic.
we'll make sure we continue to
Fantastic.
push
Much
that out there.
appreciated. I think that New Yorkers are really eager to participate in the work of the commission, and they will come and testify if they are aware of these opportunities. So those are my preliminary remarks. I will be very brief. It doesn't have to do with fiscal policy, although I'm very interested to hear what my colleagues had to say. But today I want to present to you a formal position on behalf of the City Club recommending that registered lobbyists be restricted from being appointed to official task forces, working groups, and boards of the City of New York. The presence of registered lobbyists in these critical roles poses significant concerns regarding conflict of interest. It is vital for our community decision-making processes to maintain the highest standard of impartiality and integrity. Allowing registered lobbyists to hold positions within these bodies risk undermining public trust and could potentially skew decisions in favor of special interest groups rather than the public good. By restricting the appointment of registered lobbyists to these roles, we can ensure that our task forces, working groups, and boards remain focused on serving the public interests. This measure will help safeguard against undue influence and limit bias and external pressures. And I thank you for taking this into consideration.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hearing no questions or comments? Okay, thank you very much. Ben Tucker, Tiffany Fulton, and Goran Zvorkan. Ben Tucker, Tiffany Fulton, and Goran Zvorkan. You are Ben, correct?
Yes.
And you are Goran and Tiffany. Up, come on up. Okay, we'll start with you, Ben.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you to the Charter Revision Commission for welcoming the public to submit testimony. My name is Ben Tucker. I'm here representing YAFED. We're a nonprofit advocacy organization committed to protecting the educational rights of children in New York's non-public schools. And we've been fighting for improvements to the quality of education at failing yeshivas for over a decade. Last year, the New York State Education Department enacted Commissioner's Regulation Part 130, which outlines an enforcement mechanism by which local school districts are to hold non-public schools accountable to State Education Law, Section 3204. This law, known as the Compulsory Education Law, first passed over 100 years ago, and it demands that every non-public school offer an education that is substantially equivalent to what is offered by local public schools. Commissioner's Regulation Part 130 is a step in the right direction, but the unfortunate reality is that many yeshivas are continuing to ignore the law. Some have even taken a radical stand, proclaiming that they should be free of all government oversight. Sadly, this position is supported by a few city and state elected officials who continue to politicize the educational rights of New York's non-public school students and seek to undermine the current law and the implementation of the regulation of Commissioner's Part 130. Under the current enforcement framework, all non-public schools in New York State must have demonstrated compliance with Education Law Section 3204 by the end of the 2024 to 2025 school year. Demonstration can be performed by one of 6 pathways, including using a state-approved accreditor or having a local school district conduct a review. The school district must catalog how each school demonstrates compliance and report to the state when such action has occurred and how. While we're hopeful that this regulation will have a significant impact on the quality of general education programs throughout the non-public school sector, we're concerned that it alone is not a sufficiently rigorous enforcement mechanism. The politicization of this issue and the history of complacency on the part of the state's education regulators demand that the system have built-in checks and balances. For that reason, in order to safeguard the educational rights of New York City's non-public school students, we recommend to the Charter Revision Commission that the New York City Comptroller be vested with the authority to audit the programmatic reviews and the compliance demonstration of all non-public schools under the jurisdiction of the New York City Department of Education. The expertise of the Comptroller's Office and their ability to track fund disbursements to program activities will be an invaluable aid in ensuring that bad actors are prevented from obfuscating the process or otherwise inhibiting school reform. Every child has a right to an education, and the children of New York City have waited long enough for educational justice. We hope you consider our proposal, and we thank you for the opportunity to speak today.
Thank you very much. Goran? Did I say that right?
Yeah, close enough.
Tell me how it's said.
Goran.
Goran.
Yeah. Thank you for letting me speak. My qualifications are that I am a private citizen who lives here, so hopefully that is enough. And I promise this is under 3 minutes.
You're a New Yorker.
I wanted to preface this by saying that sometime back, I read a series of interviews that talked to average citizens in different countries, asking them what they admired about various other countries. One of the most common sentiments expressed about the U.S. was how much people were amazed and loved our national parks. The idea of a country realizing the importance of giving its citizens access to nature and preserving that nature resonated with many people outside of our borders, and I'm sure within them as well. Even our more ordinary siblings across the Atlantic in the UK recognize the importance of public access to parkland, with their colloquially called right to roam, namely the right of citizens to traverse natural land regardless of ownership. In a city as dense as ours, and one hopefully getting denser through the City of Yes program, providing access to green spaces will become more and more important and require increasingly clever solutions. But there are own goals in this regard we are currently committing. There are private parks in this city. So my proposal is simple: introduce an amendment to the city charter banning private parks. Asking
Say
to
banning private parks?
banning. Access to nature should not be a luxury afforded to a select few, but a right granted to all. Thank you.
Thank you. Tiffany Fulton.
Hi, how are you? I can be more prepared. I was asked to come to this meeting. I'm representing Silent Voices United, Inc., as well as C3, which is the citywide clergy collective initiative to end gun violence. How city government can work more efficiently and better respond to youth needs. Improving efficiency and responsive of the city government to meet the needs of youth involves several targeted strategies. Youth advisory boards, establishing advisory boards or councils composed of youth representatives to provide direct input on policy programs and initiatives that affect them. Accessibility services and information, ensuring that information about youth program services and resources is easily accessible through digital platforms, social media, and community centers. 3, youth-friendly spaces, creating safe and welcoming spaces such as youth centers, libraries, recreational facilities where young people can gather, learn, and participate in activities. 4, youth employment programs, expanding job training, internships, opportunities, and youth employment initiatives that provide valuable skills and experiences for future careers. 5, education and career guidance, enhancing support for educational attainment and career development through mentoring programs, college readiness initiatives, and vocational training. 6, health and wellness services, increasing access to health services, mental health support, and recreation activities that promote physical and emotional well-being among youth. 7, civic engagement and leadership development, encouraging youth participation in community decision-making process, leadership training, and volunteer opportunities to foster civic responsibilities and activism. 8, technology and innovation, leveraging technology to engage youth in digital literacy programs, coding workshops, and initiatives that harness their creativity and innovation. 9, community outreach and engagement, conducting outreach efforts to actively involve youth from diverse backgrounds and communities in city planning, cultural events, and social initiatives. 10, feedback mechanism, establishing mechanisms for ongoing feedback from youth to evaluate the effectiveness of city programs and policies and to make adjustments based on their input. By implementing these strategies, city government can better understand and address the adverse needs and aspirations of youth, ensuring they have the support and opportunities necessary to thrive and contribute positively in their communities. And what I wanted to say as far as city council is concerned, and I'm a not-for-profit, so I do understand the struggles of not-for-profits to be able to survive and provide in their communities. And the wait, as far as waiting for funds to be able to do what we need to do, it's a problem. And I think we need to give our city council more control to be able to do what they need to do as far as the community needs. We don't have enough of that because I feel like the budget is a problem. I think funds to be able to do what we need to do, there need to be more funding as far as city council.
Great. Thank you very much. Any questions, comments? Yes, sir.
Have any of those, was it 10 points that you had?
10 points, yes.
10 points have been taken
I
up?
wish I would have loved to provide you with some.
That's
but this
okay.
was
Maybe
last
you
minute.
can email them to
Have
us.
any of those 10 points been taken up with DYCD?
That's a problem also. I've talked to various other organizations that are not-for-profit, and the process to be able to fill out the necessary applications to be able to get funding or get support from DYCD is very difficult. They said it's an easy process, but the process has become more difficult in order to get the funding from DYCD to become a vendor.
I think what I'm suggesting is that there's contact be made with DYCD and try to meet with the commissioner or some parts of his staff to discuss some of these points. I think he'd be very interested in hearing from you.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you very, yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Tiffany, for that detailed, very detailed presentation. How could, and I heard everything, and I know, what you're saying, I hear what you're saying, but the Charter Commission, how could we, or what would you like for us to do to put this into action, emotion, or?
Amendment.
I think we need to be able to have more conversation so we can be guided through the process to be able to get the assistance and the help that we need as far as city council is concerned. I think city council arms are tied in a lot of things that they're able to do for the community.
Okay, so that's why we're having these hearings, so the community could have a voice and we hear you. So we, the Charter Commission, could make sure that your voices are heard and everybody know what's going on. So that's why I asked, what could the City Charter Commission, I'm not, talking about the city council, but I'm talking about our Charter Commission. What would you like to see us do, and how would you word this for us to make it happen?
I think I need to go back to the table. Like I said, this was last minute. Somebody asked me to come to the meeting and I put something together because youth are very important to me. What's happening in youth, getting them more engaged and involved in their community. We need more of that. And I was looking through the charter while I was sitting here. So there's things that I need to basically take the time to review to get a better understanding as far as how you can help.
Well, you
I'm
can
he-
certainly email us.
Thank you.
Take your time, and
Thank
you
you.
still have a month.
I just wanted to say something about you. so.
No, we appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
yes.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
In person, we have Harold Wacker and Andrea Gordillo and Frank Morano on Zoom. So Frank, you're up. You're on mute, Frank.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I appreciate it. I'm going to be uncharacteristically brief because you were kind enough to let me go a few extra minutes at the Staten Island hearing, and I'm going to be submitting lengthier testimony in writing, which I do hope you'll review and consider as you make your decisions about what to put on the ballot. I first wanted to take issue with what I've heard from some of the good government groups. I'm not going to mention them, and some of the activists, and even some in the press who I think are coming from a very good place. But instead of attacking the commission and pointing out all the flaws with the process, I really do think their efforts would be better spent offering ideas and suggestions, like everybody here has done tonight, for how city government can be improved, whether it's in terms of public safety, fiscal responsibility, or something else. So rather than get the public riled up, I would hope that those good government groups that are trying to foment populist outrage would instead encourage people to show up and testify like we're all doing. So that's a bit disappointing. And I hope that folks realize that whether the plot process is flawed or not, the charter revision questions that you guys put on the ballot this year are going to count just as much as a charter revision process whose process they were very happy with. So I just want to get that out there. It seems to me like the battle that you guys are facing with the Charter Commission is the same battle that New York City is facing in terms of voter apathy and in terms of lack of participation. And I'm here once again to advocate that the charter consider putting on the ballot nonpartisan elections, changing the way that city elections are structured so that every general election is structured the way a nonpartisan special election would be. In my view, this would be very helpful for fiscal responsibility. The city spends about $13.5 million to administer citywide primary elections. If we had just one round of elections, as is the case if we were to implement just special elections for everything in a nonpartisan manner with ranked choice voting, we could save $13.5 million to pay for cops, pay for firefighters, pay for universal 3K, and a lot of other things that are currently on the chopping block because of the fiscal situation that the city is in. And the other thing that I wanted to speak to, and this is the last thing I'll mention, and I do appreciate you reviewing the written testimony that I'm going to submit, is the issue that Commissioner Rose and Commissioner Sisora raised in the last hearing, which is whether or not a partisan label should be on the ballot. In my view, the answer is clear that it should not be. Chairman Sisora, you made the case that everyone's going to know what everyone is, and that's exactly right. And they should know what everyone is. And it's the job of the candidates to communicate their beliefs to the voters. However, what I think we're doing by making a political party identification the only thing that the voters hear about a candidate is we're saying to the voters that that's the most important thing that they need to know. And it's not. Voters should want to learn, and candidates should want to communicate their beliefs to them, their education, their professional experience, their family experience, their passion, their interests, a whole host of issues. So the way elections have been administered in New York City, except for nonpartisan specials, where we decide that that's the only piece of information that should be on the ballot, I think is so foolish and so short-sighted. And unfortunately, I think it leads to Republicans and independents in most of the city. When that Republican or independent label is on the ballot, it looks like a scarlet letter. And it's the same thing for Democrats running in Republican districts. So I appreciate the opportunity to testify. I know at times I might be trying your patience. I recognize that you guys have put in a lot of work already, and your reward for this is to get criticized by everybody that doesn't agree with the process or that doesn't agree with what you come up with. So I appreciate the opportunity, and I hope you'll consider putting nonpartisan elections on the ballot this
Thank
fall.
you, Frank. Thank you very much, Frank. Okay, I just want to confirm, is Harold Walker here? No, okay. Andrea Cordillo, you are our last speaker tonight,
Hi,
but
everyone.
you still have 3 minutes.
Okay, I'll keep it very short.
Okay.
So I'm here representing Manhattan Community Board 3 this evening. We represent Manhattan's East Village, Lower East Side, and Chinatown. Like I said, I just have 3 short proposals. We advocate for assigning and formalizing comprehensive support services for community boards that will cover staffing, technical assistance, and meeting locations. Borough president offices handle payroll, yet lack other administrative and technical support, leaving community board managerial staff lacking personnel services uniquely among New York City employees. We also need to employ full-time urban planners as currently mandated by city charter, but is not funded, in order to independently cater to our ULURP responsibilities. And the role should not be fulfilled by DCP, Department of City Planning. With unpaid board members lacking urban planning experience and city mandates requiring adherence to legal and procedural requirements, it's vital that community boards have dedicated urban planner support, even though it's currently unfunded by the city charter. And lastly, we condemn the 60-day limitation on shelter stays for families of public school students as educational abuse, and believe that the city must waive the 60-day rule for asylum seeker families of children in New York City public schools, prioritizing principles of education access, stability, and success for all students, irrespective of their housing circumstances. And we propose that the right to shelter be mandated into the city shelter in line with our resolved position. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you very much. So I can tell you at the last Charter Commission, the request for planners to be at community boards was brought up several times.
Yes.
So we've heard it. I could say at least I've heard it in the past.
Yes, I remember it from 2019,
Yes.
and we still maintain that position. So
Great.
thank you for noting that.
Remember that?
Yeah, remember that?
It was implemented, but it wasn't, it wasn't.
So it was implemented.
But not funded.
It wasn't
Correct.
executed.
There's no money to.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, thank you all. Have a good
All
evening.
right, thank you very much. Any questions? So turn it over to you all if you have any final comments before we adjourn for the evening. Okay, well, this was a great, great evening, a great hearing, and I think we have a lot of work to do after tonight. So I thank everybody. I will call for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to accept.
All right, all in favor? Aye. Have a wonderful evening, everyone. Thank you.